Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, more like Captive Great is what I would say if this movie was good. This is Captive State. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Captive State, which we're talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how have you been doing the last couple weeks?
I've been doing okay, you know. Labor Day was this week, which marks the official end of summer. And at least in LA, it's the official start of second worst summer, which runs right through Halloween. Spooky season is sweaty season.
That's like a yearly thing for you guys? That's pretty common?
My feeling has always been that like right around Halloween, the weather will suddenly cool off. And if we're lucky, it happens for Halloween so you can put on a costume and not sweat through it.
That's interesting because we've also had second worst summer, but it's not a typical thing for us.
Okay.
This week has all been in the mid to high 90s with extremely high humidity. But like at the same time, the leaves are starting to change colors and fall off the trees.
Oh, weird.
So it's a very jarring thing to witness. But aside from that, I saw a bear this morning. That was cool.
That's cool, unless you see it too up close and personal.
We have a bus stop for our community for all the kids. And we were standing there and one of the neighbors' dogs just started going nuts. All the parents like kind of peeked over. There was a bear just eating acorns that fell off a tree right in somebody's front yard. So of course all the kids wanted to run up to it, but we had to corral them.
Yeah. Kids bus stop, not the best place for bears.
No, I see that now that I told the story. And I was like very excited about it. Maybe I should have been a little more upset. Wow, it's crazy. There's a bear there.
If there's dogs and clusters of parents, it seems like together you can keep the kids safe.
We have black bears around here, which are pretty docile compared to like your grizzly bears.
They're not grizzlies.
Bears.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
They're not going to attack you. They're not fighters. They're lovers.
Oh, that's nice.
And then I'm going to a couple concerts this weekend I'm really excited about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm seeing Deathlock and Baby Metal tomorrow. I've mentioned that in the past, I think.
I remember that, yeah.
And then Sunday, me and my wife, Jamie, are going to a concert I've been anticipating for a very long time. We're seeing The Postal Service and Death Cab for Cutie. Same frontman, so Ben Gibbard is pulling double duty. It's the anniversary of Transatlanticism, which is a very special album to me. That's that little bird right up here in my...
Oh, I see him, yeah.
That's Transatlanticism. I have the vinyl on my wall is what I'm referring to, listeners.
Not an actual bird.
Not an actual bird. They're playing... The Postal Service really only has one album.
Okay.
And they're playing that front to back, and then they're playing Transatlanticism front to back. So I'm really excited to see that.
Live music is back, folks.
Yeah, I'm back at it. Back on my shit. But before we start talking about Captive State, I needed to ask you what you watched that you want to tell the people about. And I genuinely don't know what you've watched. We haven't we haven't really been in sync about that.
So I dipped way back into the barrel of old movies to 1986's Platoon. I was inspired by a podcast that I know we both listened to, The Big Picture. They did a nicely produced miniseries about the movies, which are about and inspired by the Vietnam War. And Platoon is obviously right up there among the biggest of those names.
It's called Do We Get to Win This Time, right?
That's right. Super cool. Highly recommend it for our pod listeners looking for other movie-related content. It inspired me to go back and watch Platoon because it was one of those movies that kind of traumatizes you. And I saw it way back in the day. And it was a huge phenomenon back in the 80s. And I kind of didn't want to see it again. So I'm like, actually, now I do want to see it again. And so, first of all, what is there to say about Platoon? But I do have a few reflections upon revisiting it so many decades later.
Sure.
One of the cool things is something was lost on me at the time, but Stone intentionally cast Willem Dafoe and Tom Berenger to play against type because Berenger had been seen as much more warm and cuddly coming out of The Big Chill. And Dafoe, I don't know what he had just come off of, but something where he was suitably evil.
He's a creepy dude. Like,
he's creepy. He's naturally, he has a villain look, but brilliant move. That's, I think, is one of the moves that really makes the movie because Dafoe is the sweetest sweetheart in this movie, like sweeter than you remember him being. You're like, no, they don't let sergeants act like that. And Berenger is just the nastiest son of a bitch you ever saw. And he won Best Supporting Actor for that role. He's so good. It's a really good movie. It's one of those movies that makes you feel like, oh, wow, I'm seeing how things really are. And of course, the big part of the point of that podcast series was it's important not to mistake movies about the Vietnam War for the actual Vietnam War because the perspectives are quite limited. But man, the tension, like Jungle's a ruin for me. In between this movie and Coppola's Tiger and Apocalypse Now. Like
I was about to call out the tiger as it was a scene that I always half remember. Like, is that really in the movie? And then every time I watch it, I'm like, yep, there it is.
So tense. This movie, the jungle stuff is so tense, but it's great. I definitely recommend going back to it.
I kind of wonder about Tom Berenger because he's always worked, but he's been in kind kind of less than stellar stuff in the second half of his career. And he came out of the gate just throwing 100 mile or catching 100 miles an hour, I guess I should say, because he was the catcher in Major League.
Oh, right.
But like his career in the 80s and like early 90s was fucking fantastic. And then I don't know what changed. I would love to hear like a retrospective on his career and why he kind of started doing direct to video stuff. And then I know Nolan brought him back for Inception, and that was really cool to see him have a big role like that in a blockbuster movie. Maybe he's an asshole, and that's why, but I never got that vibe. Tom Berenger, underrated actor. And when you told me that you were watching Platoon, I hit you with the I'll never watch Platoon again because it traumatized me when I watched it as like a 13-year-old. And you said I had a similar experience, but it's maybe not as bad now.
It's still rough. There's some really rough shit in there. So I'm not going to tell anybody it's like a fun watch, but it's quite a good movie.
And you said you were scared to watch The Deer Hunter. And I said, actually, I think Platoon is way worse than The Deer Hunter in that sense.
Yeah.
But now we should both watch both of them in that comparison.
We should see who's more traumatized.
You went back to 1986. I went back to a month ago. Slightly different take on the show and tell this week. I saw the fucking hit of the century, the hit of the year, at least decade, maybe when it's all said and done. Cracked $1 billion. I saw Barbie.
How was it? Is it worth all the hype?
I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Had a great time at the movies with Barbie and Ken and all the Barbies and Kens. It's an interesting movie because it is trying to be a mass market appeal to everyone, including teen girls. Maybe probably not preteen girls so much. It does feel like a movie made for adults who remembered playing with Barbie when they were kids. But it is trying to appeal to them in the terms of a regular comedy while also having some things to say about society and patriarchy and feminism. So I don't know that it always is able to keep all those plates spinning simultaneously, but I give it a hell of a lot of credit for trying, and it hits the mark most of the time. But even if you just go into it taking it as a comedy on face value, it's very funny. Nice. Really well done. Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach co-wrote it. What a project. You know, I remember it felt like a meme when they announced it, and then we started seeing the set photos. We were like, is this a real thing? And then it made $1 billion.
I've heard people talk about her intentionality and saying that she wanted to break out of where she came from, which is nothing that needed breaking out of, but she's like, I want to be a big studio director. And she took on this project. And once you clock $1 billion, you kind of made your bones in one shot. Yeah.
And she did it without, not to diminish the accomplishments of any MCU directors, but like that almost felt like a shortcut to that. You do your indie hits and then you get the big paycheck and you make your MCU movie that's guaranteed to be a hit, although not as much anymore. She did it with a property that's kind of been dormant in a lot of popular culture. They still make Barbie. It's still popular as a toy. Like my daughter loves her Barbies, but it's just, it doesn't permeate the zeitgeist like it used to. And she still made it a hit.
Pretty neat story.
It is.
I'm going to have to see the movie.
I'm pretty sure by the time this episode is out, Barbie will be streaming.
Oh, nice.
There should be a bunch of stuff coming to streaming in the next few weeks between Barbie, Oppenheimer, Dead Reckoning. There's a lot of movies that have been in theaters for an extended stretch and haven't quite hit streaming yet.
This is a rich time for us homebodies.
Indeed. But Captive State. I picked this movie. It's a movie that, unlike a lot of the movies we talk about, is not a cult hit. Not an underrated gem. It's just a movie that nobody remembers existing. Despite pretty stacked cast, cool idea, cool concept. The marketing, I think, for this movie was honestly excellent.
Yes.
It will be interesting to unpack what went wrong here. But what did you know about this movie? Do you remember the trailers, the posters?
No, I'm the nobody who doesn't remember it because it missed me entirely. I can't remember ever hearing of it until you said the name. And then I'm like, oh, I probably should have heard of it. It's got big actors in it. It looks like a big production. And no, it's a ghost movie.
Yeah, it's a kind of more adult, grown-up alien invasion thriller, which, hell yeah, give me like the small-scale alien invasion thriller. Show me how a community responds to like occupancy by this malevolent force. That's a great concept to me, but we're going to have to go through the beats and figure out if it paid off on that concept. So do you want me to get into the making of the movie?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. Movie critics, podcasters, film Twitter, magazines, websites can all seem to agree on one thing. We need movies that aren't tied to existing IP. New and interesting ideas being presented by passionate filmmakers benefits the industry as a whole. So when husband and wife team Rupert Wyatt and Erica Beanie collaborated on a screenplay for an alien invasion thriller named Captive State, the industry took notice.
What are you guys doing? What is this?
A heated bidding war broke out among studios, with participant media winning alongside Amblin Partners.
We'll take it, whatever it is.
Intended to be a more grounded, small-scale invasion story, focusing on the city of Chicago's response to the initial arrival and resulting occupancy by the legislators, Captive State was given a modest but sufficient $25 million budget to tell its story.
If I had $25 million, I'd be modest, but sufficient.
Wyatt went about casting, securing up-and-coming stars like Ashton Sanders and Jonathan Majors, alongside seasoned veterans like John Goodman, Vera Farmiga, and Alan Ruck. Also, MGK is there for some reason, and maybe Dane Cook.
Well, Well, let's hope not.
Filming began on February 15th, 2017 in Chicago, with the majority of filming taking place in the neighborhood of Pilsen. That's Pilsen. Did you get that? The neighborhood the movie is set in is called Pilsen. Part of it also takes place in Wicker Park, but Pilsen is where most of the movie happens.
Pilsen.
The first hints that not all was well with the movie started in post-production, as the film was initially slated for a blockbuster release date of August 17th, 2018, but was pushed way back to March 29th, 2019. It was then moved forward 2 weeks to its eventual landing spot of March 15th, 2019. Nonetheless, the trailer they released was actually awesome, and I was stoked. But the advertising campaign lost steam, critics were mostly meh on it, and when the movie eventually debuted, it only made $3 million its opening weekend, good for 7th place. It dropped an astounding 70%, that's 7-0, the following week, only pulling in $900K despite being in the same amount of theaters. With that, the studio cut its losses, pulling it from almost all theaters and burying it. It's pretty much forgotten now, but on a brighter note, MGK was injured during the filming, and when he complained, he was told to suck it up, pussy.
Is that true? Did you just make that part up?
I added the pussy, but he broke his collarbone during the scene where he's pushed up against the wall by the cops.
Uh-huh.
And when he complained, they were like, yeah.
Even they didn't think very highly of him. I know that you did not like him in this movie, but
I didn't like him in this movie or any song. I'm just not an MGK fan. I find him obnoxious and untalented.
I'm lucky enough that I've only experienced him at arm's length through like Twitter posts, marriage gossip shit. And
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is, so I'm going to ignore it. And he showed up here. I didn't know who he was, but he wasn't very good.
And then we have to unpack whether or not Dane Cook is in this movie, because we both reacted to a shot like, is that fucking Dane Cook? But he's not listed in the cast, so it could have been like an uncredited cameo, or it could have just not been Dane Cook.
I think I found him. I went deep into the full IMDb cast and crew, and there's a guy that's credited as Pirate Radio DJ, who was, I think, who we were both thinking it was, and he's some kind of actual real-world DJ and actor.
Wow. Is his name like Dean Chef? Because maybe it's a pseudonym for Dane Cook. This guy looks so much like Dane Cook now, because Dane Cook now doesn't really look like the Dane Cook most people remember.
The young, handsome one.
But we've seen him recently enough to know what he looks like now. So I think that's where we got our wires crossed, because he's had some work done, let's say.
But for headcanon, I think we could still keep Dane Cook in this movie, because
hell yeah.
Why not? No one's going to watch it.
Why not?
You pointed out in your monologue right there that the trailer was pretty good. I saw your notes on that. I went to go to YouTube and watch the trailer. I watched two different trailers, very different. One was the theatrical 3-minute, and one was a 90-second.
The 90-second one is really good, right?
They're both really good. They're both really creative. They took the raw materials and they crafted their own little story within the context of the trailer. They spent some money and they hired some really talented trailer house to crank out some good stuff. And it does create a little bit of letdown when you watch the movie and it's not nearly as exciting or fun as the trailer promises.
I would say this movie, it's not a total failure, but it's not exciting or fun really at any point. What you get out of this movie that you could describe as a good thing is kind of like look at that. That's interesting. That's as far as it ever gets.
Well, I think it's time we break open the can of worms and talk about why we think that's so. It's because this movie has a huge twist in it.
That's revealed in the final minute of the movie.
We're pretty loose and cavalier with spoilers on this show. We often do movies that are pretty old. This movie is neither new nor old, but
and it's also underseen. It's not a movie.
That's true. You can't figure everybody knows it. But because this movie in particular hinges so hard on this twist, we decided to just warn everybody. If you actually want to experience what this movie's like, maybe go watch it and come back, because we're going to have to spoil the twist. And I don't know, maybe the movie's better. If you knew it going in, you can create the drama in your head instead of waiting for the movie to reveal it to you.
I have a lot of problems with the twist in this movie. Not because it's a bad twist. It's more because the movie is built in such a way, and it's frankly performed in such a way where I feel like there has to be a twist. None of this works without something else. And then finally, when the credits are almost starting to roll, you get it and you're like, okay, like great. It almost, it's hard to explain why I feel this way, but it's like every line of dialogue needs to be able to be taken in two ways for the twist to work. So that makes all the dialogue written in this really robotic and monotone way. And it's performed in these really like kind of low energy scenes. Yeah. It's just it's a very janky way to unravel a mystery.
The movie has to work to keep you in the dark, or it has to make these decisions to leave things mysterious. There's a lot of scenes with very little dialogue, a lot of meaningful looks, but you can't take the meaning because you don't know what it means yet. So yeah, you're probably more perceptive than me in getting that sneaking sense that something must be up, because I just thought it was just like a bad movie where they're like, oh, they think it's suspense, but they're really just keeping us in the dark, and they're not introducing us to the characters. They're just showing a bunch of characters running around doing stuff. And it's like, why and why should we care? And in the end, they give you a really good reason to care, but it's too late. great. And it doesn't have the big, I mean, Sixth Sense is the archetypal big twist movie. Sixth Sense works really well while you're watching it.
Right.
And it makes you reconsider everything in an incredible rush when you find out the twist at the end and rack back through it in your brain. And in fact, the movie helps. It gives you some flashbacks to show you, look, what all this meant when you didn't know what you were watching. This movie doesn't do that. It just kind of...
I think the flashbacks in The Sixth Sense actually are a mistake, but I understand twists weren't as prevalent then.
It's a little bit of hand-holding, so you could say, okay, he could have done without him and trust people's minds to do it, but it does pay off its twists really strongly. This one, like you said, happens so late that the credits are practically rolling by the time you've taken it all in. And then, yeah, it's like a mind fuck, a Black Mirror Twilight Zone type of mind fuck, but you just paid 2 hours of your time to get mind fucked instead. Like, it's not the right format to do that.
And it's not really a fun movie to rewatch now that you know the twist, because like we said, it's kind of dull. The performances are very muted. The dialogue isn't exciting or dynamic.
There's little things I got out of the second watch where I'm like, oh, okay, he's saying that, and that can mean both this and this. And okay, it makes a little more sense. It's like most movies, there's details that the movie makes more sense on the second pass, but it's still a really flat kind of movie, despite the fact that there's a lot of action. It actually jumps straight into its action. It makes you watch these whole big conspiracy plots unfold.
Yeah. And it's got a stacked cast. I know we mentioned it in the monologue too, but like, how do you put James Ransom in a movie and just be like, play the most laid back, level-headed dude? That's fucking Ziggy from The Wire. He's a complete lunatic. He's a live wire. I don't know why you cast him and then don't let him do his thing. I'm not saying he doesn't have range.
Oh, see, yeah, I didn't know who that was. His face looked familiar, but yeah, that character does very little. He just sits there.
Does very little.
Looks gloomy.
Yeah, cast Ziggy to give the movie some pep. Instead, they give that role to fucking MGK, who's doing a lot of hand acting. He's talking in like super exaggerated AAVE, and I guess he was still rapping at this time, but he's doing this thing with his hands where he's like in a Beastie Boy music video, like he can't just say things. He's got to gesture wildly. He's embarrassingly bad in this. But yeah, it's a bizarre movie. I had such hopes for it. Even knowing how badly it bombed, and it bombed fucking hard. Yeah. I didn't even mention it in the monologue. Its third week, it made $100,000.
Oh shit. It's not
$100,000 in its third week bad.
No, something happened.
What the fuck? How did it get so...
It's flat. It's disappointing, especially if you were hyped for the trailer. It doesn't thrill you that way, but it's not like embarrassing. It's not totally incoherent. It's just kind of dull, and it seems unnecessarily reserved. Like you said, you can tell it's holding stuff back. But should we get into the story so we can finally... We don't have to tease our audience.
I just have to... One last thing I wanted to say, which is that I don't remember when I first saw the trailer for this, but it was well ahead of the release of the movie, and I got excited. I remember I saw the trailer in a movie theater, so I was seeing it was attached to another movie. And then I'm pretty sure this movie came and went without me even knowing it was released. So something must be like the studio ran out of money. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't have the money for a big marketing push, because it felt like the marketing ramped down instead of up, petered out instead of ramping up as it got closer to the release date, because I didn't even know it was out until it was already gone.
It was a quick one.
But there's no retrospectives done on Captive State. Nobody's doing these oral histories like they do of other movies that bombed, like Office Space or like...
It's not good enough, and it's also not bad enough. So I think in the end, we're not going to say this is a terrible movie. It's an offensive waste of time to turn it on, but it has some questionable decision-making at its core, and then it leaves its actors and its story kind of hanging out to dry because they're all trying to make something work, and it's just not a lot of it works.
It's not a terrible movie. It's a very frustrating movie. All right, let's get into the story here. You want to kick us off?
Okay, here we go. In the year 2019, aliens land and take control over planet Earth, instituting strict martial law. In Chicago, two boys are orphaned when their police detective father runs a roadblock and comes face to face with the creatures. 8 years later, in 2027, the younger brother Gabriel, played by Ashton Sanders, is scraping by under the alien regime, but looking for a way to escape. Meanwhile, Gabriel's older brother Rafe, played by Jonathan Majors, was part of Phoenix, an anti-insurgent group that was recently wiped out in a major government raid. A raid led by none other than their father's old police partner, William Mulligan, played by John Goodman. Everyone thinks Rafe is dead and Phoenix is no more. But Mulligan is keeping tabs on young Gabriel because Mulligan believes the network is regrouping, and he's right.
So the movie starts pretty strong, I would say. Relatively okay.
It's got a fun, cold open type of scene in it that's scary. Society just being taken under this new regime of martial law, and one guy's trying to get out with his family, and it results in a violent death.
Let's explain how he dies. He's exploded into red mist with his wife. Does that qualify qualify for a cool kill?
I would say that's a cool kill.
Cool kill. Cool kills. All right.
It's cool. They drive under this underpass. There's some spooky aliens at the other end. And she's like, turn the car around, back up. And of course, he can't get it in gear because cars don't go in gear when you're...
Cars don't go in gear when the aliens are near. No, I think they are able to shut down motors or engines. Like that's kind of a thing that happens.
That's true. That does seem to happen later to a bus. But yeah, it's unexpected because you see the aliens kind of in the distance at first. And there's the sound of them loading some kind of gun thing and shooting it at them, although they never really show what that is. And the windshield explodes and the parents vaporize. And that's when you realize there's these two young boys sitting in the back seat who are somewhat traumatized by the event.
As you would. But then we get an extended close-up shot of one of the aliens, which is a bold choice to do it literally before the opening credits. And I was a little underwhelmed by them. They're a little too humanoid, I think, to really work as like creepy, scary aliens.
I know what you mean. They start out, the first shot of them, they're all crouching along the ground and you can't tell how many arms and legs they have. And they're like, oh, that's a cool, freaky alien. And then they kind of stand upright and they're pretty much humanoid size and shape. You're like, oh, it's this is kind of a guy.
Sometimes they could be spiky. That's it. It's not a great creature design. Then you remember a $25 million budget for a sci-fi movie in 2019 is not a ton of money. Luckily, they work much better as like unseen boogeymen.
Yes. I think we can give the story good credit for that, is that they picked their spots. They didn't write a story where you have to have a ton of aliens running around in the open. And it doesn't feel like they're hiding them from you like it felt like they were hiding the dragons from us in Reign of Fire recently. So it's the right mix. It's just that they weren't as cool and scary once you got a glimpse of them as maybe we hoped.
They're no xenomorphs. Like, it's not an iconic creature design or anything.
There was a funny moment in that first scene that can kind of take you out of it, is that you haven't met these characters, right? This is literally the cold open of the movie. And there's this family of four in their car, and they're in this long line. They're getting processed into whatever new sort of martial law regime is happening on the streets of Chicago. And you don't know even who the dad is. He just goes, this is taking too long. And he swerves out of line of the cars. And it's like, he's going to establish him as a police detective who instills in his boys the idea that we mustn't bow to the aliens. We should always regroup and fight back. But at this point, it's just an angry dad who's frustrated with waiting in a slow line. So he like swerves out of the line, and then he's swerving around and dodging cops, and the car's loaded down with like luggage on top, and he's hitting barricades. And there's kind of like a National Lampoon Vacation moment there of like crazy dad swerving the family car, and then it ends in scary tragedy. So kind of funny contrast there.
You described it as underwritten, which I think is the right way to describe it. Because I was watching like, what's this guy so mad about? Like,
yeah, I think underwriting is the aesthetic they were going for in this movie. The rest of the movie is underwritten because, again, they were trying to keep the twist under wraps. And they were trying to just go, we're going to make it the mood of the movie. It's just going to be spare. You're going to have to try to pay attention to follow what's happening. But that's a very fine art to get it just right, where you give the audience just enough information and not too much.
It's underwritten and you just know they had to be directing John Goodman to be so flat and monotone and stoic, because that's not who he is as an actor. He's a big presence, and he never raises his voice over a very robotic speaking tone.
Yes. And the thing I took the second time, should we jump into John Goodman and the rest of the story? Or do you want to touch on the credit sequence before we...
Oh, yeah. Let's get to the credit sequence because it's approximately 29 minutes long.
This is the one part they did not underwrite because they had a lot of credits to show on the screen. So they wrote the shit out of this.
It's basically just an extended monologue about what's going on in Chicago, tracing everything from when the aliens arrived to resistance efforts, successful attacks on the aliens, unsuccessful attacks on the aliens, what neighborhoods people are forming in. I hear Pilsen is a hotbed of insurgent activity.
So this is done visually while the credits are rolling, and it's like a visual montage of news footage and whatnot with a green screen terminal in the middle with text being typed out of messages. It's very matter of fact. It's pretty clunky, actually.
Yeah.
The statements of history that are on screen, which I guess is made to make it easy to read so that people can digest this basically exposition dump that's going on during the credits.
It's quite an exposition dump. I like a ground level take on an alien invasion story, or look at Cloverfield, a movie I really enjoy. But that movie, like, you have to be clever about how you dole out information to the audience, either about what's happening now or what happened previously that caused these circumstances. And the movie just didn't want to bother with any of that.
Maybe that's showing a lack of confidence. But on the other hand, it's like, if you feel responsible to pick up on everything that's being written on screen in those credits, you feel like you've been told too much. But actually, like the first time through, you can't even get it all. Like in essence, they do tell this whole preamble story story and set up the story that's about to happen. But I couldn't make sense of it because it's just kind of too much when you haven't even got your footing yet.
So clunky credit sequence, not super well done. But then now we're into the main story, so things should liven up a little bit.
They should. There's a lot of running around, and Ashton Sanders Gabriel's getting chased around by John Goodman, the police guy. And
he also never runs. He just like walks. He's like Michael Myers in this movie, basically.
He's got his little Chevy Lumina or whatever, and he's quite good at maneuvering it right onto the alley where Ashton Sanders is running, so he doesn't have to do a lot of running himself.
And he just stops in front of Ashton Sanders and is like, get in. It's like, he could just turn and run the other way up the alley again. Like, you're never going to be able to catch him in Chicago in a car when he's running through alleyways if he actually wanted to get away from it.
Yeah.
Maybe the first sign that, no.
That's something. So yeah, let's talk about the twist and why Goodman is acting this way. He's acting weird. He's acting flat, as you said. I think he's actually trying to act deeply sad and depressed, but soldiering through it, because he's at the heart of a plot where in this movie, he looks like he's the antagonist, right? He's the cop. He's the one who's tracking down not only Gabriel, who's not really one of the insurgents, but is on the fringes of society, and Gabriel's brother, who was legitimately the leader. This looks like the big bad guy, but the twist is that he's not.
He's the big good guy. He's the number one. They keep referring to this number one in the Phoenix group.
Yeah.
And there's all these theories about, is it Vera Farmiga, blah, blah, blah. And then it ends up being John Goodman. But again, we're telling you this now. You don't find this out until the last minute of the movie.
It's literally 90 seconds from the credits.
I had an inkling, but I was wondering if the movie was trying to tell me that he was in on it at first. And I was like, oh no. Then he starts like capturing the actual insurgents and torturing and killing them. And I was like, oh no, like he's actually a bad guy. So I got faked out twice.
Yeah. It made me wonder if they couldn't have still kept that plot point secret as the twist, but made him more actively the bad guy in the beginning. Because I think it is the fact that he does a lot of kind of dead-eyed staring and like real sort of sad guy cop action in this first half of the movie. Like, why is this cop so fucking sad? And they kind of reveal, they do give you one fact, is that he was Gabriel's dad's partner. So you're like, okay, but he's still a cop, so he's the bad guy in this, but he has like a weak spot for this kid, so he's trying not to let the kid get in trouble. But he's really setting up this mastermind thing. I actually, in my take of the movie, the Vera Farmiga character is truly the number one, but I guess it could go either way, whether she planned it and he's just playing his role, or whether they planned it equally. I don't know. It doesn't really make a difference, maybe.
Let's talk about Farmiga and Goodman, because they have a scene that is fucking infuriating to watch, even when you know the twist, because they speak to each other for 3 or 4 minutes. They say absolutely nothing. It's all cryptic nonsense because they can't say anything to each other or the movie would show its hand.
Yeah.
But so why do we have this fucking scene here? Because we need to meet this character.
Yeah.
And it's bad. They're 2 of my favorite actors, and I fucking hated both of them in that scene. Like, what's going on? Are you here to fuck her? Because she's a sex worker in the movie, but like, now you guys are having this big discussion. It seems like maybe there's more of an emotional connection than we first thought, but nobody says anything, but they talk a lot.
I remember I wrote down one person says, we shouldn't be doing this. And on second watch, I'm like, when you first see it, it's a sex thing. They shouldn't. He's a cop. She's a sex worker. We shouldn't be having some kind of romance, but they don't really have a romance in the scene. So you're like, what shouldn't they be doing? And then later you realize we shouldn't be plotting the giant plot against the aliens. The thing is, it's a good twist. It's incredible human drama and tragedy, what they've set up, but we can't appreciate it. We don't know that. These people know each other, love each other, and are planning to basically sacrifice their lives for the good of the planet. But we can't know that until the end.
And you're putting a lot of faith in your frankly mediocre movie that people are going to be like, oh, I got to run it back now.
Yeah.
It'll make sense again. I'm going to go see it in theaters twice. Nobody saw it in theaters once. Swing and a miss.
My conclusion is this would be a great premise for a Black Mirror type episode, right? Like 30 minutes. You can drag out a story like this. If it was writing, it would be like a short story, but you can't quite do a novel of it because you can't make people wait for the payoff to feel the dramatic irony and the great poignancy of the story that long. You can make them wait 25 minutes, 35 minutes, and then blow their minds with the big twist. But an hour and 40 is too much to drag it out.
You could do it in short story form, like you said, or you could do it in long story form. Make it a series. We know it's worked before. We had Colony, we had V, and that twist could end season 1. I feel like both those methods would work better than what we got, which is nobody's happy. You know, we should talk about how similar this movie is in concept to V and Colony, 2 shows we both at least dipped our toes into.
Yeah.
Colony was the Josh Holloway show on the USA Network. That was
right.
Pretty good. At least the first season I enjoyed. And V, you watched the original. I only saw the remake with Elizabeth Mitchell.
I remember the original was a sensation. I just looked it up. It was whenever it was 80s. I was sure it was like a series. And then I was like, maybe it's a miniseries. It was a 2-episode miniseries. It was
Seriously?
Like, network TV was weird back in the day, man. I was like, that was enough of a big deal. That 2-episode miniseries could be like a national sensation that everybody was talking about for a while.
Well, that happened with It also. That was a 2-episode miniseries that became a phenomenon. So
yeah,
the 90s was the time for that stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
We've barely talked about Gabriel, the protagonist of the movie, and Ashton Sanders, the young gentleman who portrays him. I liked Ashton Sanders in Moonlight quite a bit. I've not been able to connect with him in anything else since then, though. I was watching the Wu-Tang show on Hulu, An American Saga, and enjoying it a lot. But Ashton Sanders plays the RZA, who, if you know the RZA, he's a very animated, very eccentric character. He's got a ton of energy. He's also got a very distinctive way of speaking, perpendicular to the square. And Ashton Sanders, he might be a fine actor, but he is nothing. He's not really a dynamic actor, I would say. He's kind of stoic, and he's extremely gravelly voiced. You've heard him in this movie. He's got a baritone for sure. He's very miscast in the Wu-Tang show, but then I don't know that he has that next level.
Initially, my take on him in this movie was like, oh, this guy's interesting, but it might just be by comparison, because at that point we'd seen like Dead-Eyed John Goodman and Vera Farmiga, and then it's, they're letting this guy at least get mad in a scene and like show some emotion, so it felt refreshing. And then on second watch, I'm like, actually, he doesn't achieve that much, but I had a hard time pinning it on him because this movie gives the actors so little to work with. It's a tough assignment.
Yeah, you almost feel like they were being coached into this kind of dead-eyed monotony. And, I mean, that could be just because everyone's kind of beaten down by this occupied territory they're living in. It does seem like a pretty gray existence.
Yeah, it's all kind of rote, when you say that, you're like, okay, sure, that's what happens when people are living under this kind of regime. But like when you're doing a movie about that, or any kind of story about that, you're kind of looking for some fresh take that go, oh, yeah, these people are living under this harsh conditions, but here's how they're still human. Here's why they're still real. Here's why they still feel unique. And here's little behaviors and things that they're doing that are special, but kind of nobody does anything special. Everybody does stuff just kind of straight out of the sci-fi TV playbook.
And maybe they tried to give Gabriel some extra motivation. He does have a girlfriend in the movie, played by, I think, Madeline Brewer is her name, but the movie just kind of forgets about it. And then she pops up at the very end with John Goodman again. But she disappears for like more than half the movie, I think.
I guess you could say she rounds him out a little bit, that he's not just a guy who pulls his hoodie lower and runs across alleys. He has a life. He has wants and desires. But that whole subplot is kind of thin too, right? Like he's been trying to get them out of town. He's been working with MGK on rigging up a little speedboat to shoot across the lake and get out of the main alien zone. But that whole subplot doesn't add up to much.
Yeah, the movie drops some breadcrumbs. One of the only times it does that. Outside of major cities, the aliens don't really have a presence. But it's basically Mad Max out there. No laws, no police, anything goes. So you can head out there if you want to get out from under the alien's boot, but you might run into some other problems.
Which is a tantalizing concept, but they really don't. They just barely hint at that. You don't get to visualize any of it.
Right. Which as a series, maybe we'd get a couple episodes where they're out in the wilderness.
Now you're talking.
See? All right. You want me to get into the middle of the movie?
Sure. Let's hear what happens next.
All right. Hustling for money, Gabriel agrees to carry a coded message for some people he doesn't know. It turns out to be for the resistance group Phoenix, and their operatives take him to a deserted building where he meets none other than his older brother, Rafe. Rafe is alive and plotting an attack on an upcoming alien political rally at Soldier Field. Rafe tells his little brother, Gabriel, to get out of town and hide, but insists that he himself must stay and fight back against the aliens like their father wanted to do. Then Rafe puts in motion a complex plan involving a diverse set of resistance conspirators. They plant an undetectable bomb on the body of a local Chicago representative as he goes to liaison with his alien overlords. After the explosion, the cops crack down citywide, and the aliens send special hunter units of their own to search for the insurgents. Several of Rafe's co-conspirators are killed, and Rafe is captured. Gabriel has successfully been hiding out for a stretch, but in the aftermath of the bombing, Mulligan finally tracks him down and arrests him too.
When you read that, it was all just facts of things that happened. What's missing? There's no like expectation and satisfying the expectations. We're just watching, like, okay, they're executing a mission, and we don't know much about it, and we don't know who's doing it. It's a lot of action, but somehow it feels flat.
And also the reveal that Rafe is alive is presented as a big surprise, but we literally see a mural, a building-sized painting of Jonathan Major's face. It's like, okay, like he's going to be in this movie at some point. They're not just going to do that. They didn't purchase his likeness to graffiti it on the side of a building.
To do murals of him. Yeah, I guess that kind of gave it away.
Let's talk about Majors a little bit. As much as we said everyone else is just kind of acting with a certain drab monotony, Majors is going the other way.
He's the hot one.
He's doing some stuff.
Doesn't really work.
No, he's doing some weird stuff. My theory about Jonathan Majors as an actor, I don't want to get into my theory on him as a person, but he's like Tom Hardy. He reminds me of more than anybody in the sense that they like to have a thing. They like their characters to have a thing. They want them to talk in a certain way or have a physical kind of affectation, like they're hunched over or they walk out with a limp. Like maybe it's just how they get themselves into their characters' heads. Maybe he was like fresh out of acting school when he filmed this because like he can't pull it off here. It's bad.
It's a little, you might say it's sweaty, like he's...
Yeah, acting with a capital A.
And I think of people like Pacino, who are also known for big, expressive, idiosyncratic acting. It's like, okay, there's a good tradition of that. It's not like you shouldn't try that in Hollywood.
She got a great ass.
This movie doesn't have enough for him to hang those big gestures on. And so it's just him kind of getting wild in a tight little room.
Kind of peacocking a little bit, I guess is how you describe it, right? Especially up against Ashton Sanders, who's playing it pretty straight.
Scowling, yeah. It's weird. He comes out of nowhere and he's going 90 miles an hour. And you get the outlines of what they're trying to tell you is, okay, there's one brother who doesn't want to fight, who just wants to hide and get away and live his life. And there's the other brother who's supposedly living out the dad's wishes and says you have to sacrifice yourself to fight for humanity. And there's some tension there, but it never builds up to be the central tension of the movie the way you would think it would need to be.
They're not like at odds. They're just disagreeing.
And then they move on. And in the end, if that's the thematic question of the movie, that doesn't really get tested because Gabriel ends up sort of being forced to what he thinks is hurting the cause, but he's actually helping the cause because he's playing his unknowing role in the secret twist that everybody knew but him, or maybe Rafe didn't know. I don't know.
I think Rafe knows. It's a good question, actually.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, actually. I'm trying to think of a smoking gun that would kind of tilt it one way or the other, and I don't think there is one.
What it does is it makes the real relationship that involves sacrifice, growth, and learning between John Goodman's character and Gabriel. John Goodman, who's, he's sort of a surrogate father, and he becomes more of a surrogate father than we knew by the reveal of the relationship he had with their actual dad. It's the relationship that has some irony and some development, whereas Rafe just kind of goes in parallel, and he does his thing, Gabriel does his thing, they get entangled. Gabriel makes one hard decision. We'll talk about that in the third act. But it's kind of rote. It's kind of like obvious. So, do you want to save your brother's life or not? And he's like, I guess I should save my brother's life.
And what a life he goes on to live. We'll get into that later. Yeah, let's talk about the Soldier Field attack because it's kind of the main set. Like, I remember texting you when I was watching it, and I was like, I'm at the climax of the movie.
Yes, that was funny.
It's hitting the fan, man. Like, it's all going down now. And then when it was all over, I was like, there's 40 minutes left. I've only been watching this for an hour.
Yeah, you texted again with this actual, what the fuck? The movie's not over. I thought I just saw the ending and there's 40 minutes left.
Yeah. But the Soldier Field attack is probably, as far as the action sequences of this movie go, the best one.
They invested a lot in the mechanical details of it, and an actual bombing attack conspiracy is carried off on screen in front of you, and it's satisfying. It ends with a satisfying explosion. Some aliens get blown up along with a
crooked politician,
so it's pretty fun. Can I go on my rant about where they went too far with the spycraft, though?
Yes, please do.
So, we talked about Gabriel is taken to Rafe to give him this piece of information that unlocks this bombing plot. And then he leaves and Rafe activates the cell, right? He's the leader of this secret underground cell. And they do so much spycraft for what turns out to be a local network.
It's like 6 guys.
It's a small group of people. They're in one neighborhood. Pilsen. They keep saying Pilsen, as you mentioned in your monologue.
We should clarify why I said Pilsen so many times in my monologue. Because in this movie, John Goodman says the word Pilsen roughly 416 times. And nobody fucking talks like that. And I looked it up, and Rupert Wyatt is British. So he's not from Chicago.
Okay.
You would be like, oh, they're from over on this street. Or
right.
He's like, Pilsen. Oh, good old Pilsen. Can't believe I'm back in the old neighborhood.
Yeah. They wear that name out. And
it's fucking stilted and weird.
And it's woven in officially, too. Mulligan, the Goodman character, introduces himself as the commander of Special Branch for Pilsen. It's so important in this movie.
I think Chicago has precincts, like with numbers. Not like I'm the commander of the Pilsen unit. Even the aliens are being translated when they're questioning Goodman later. And they're like, Pilsen, that's where you're from, right? Like the aliens know it's called Pilsen too. Like
it's such a hipster neighborhood. The aliens are like, I've been meaning to try it. I heard there's some really good brew pubs, but
there are some good brew pubs in Pilsen. It's in the name.
It is. So anyway, Rafe activates the cell. He's hiding out in this bombed out thing in Wicker Park, which I guess was the last hipster neighborhood that the aliens wiped out when they found a insurgency there. He's still hiding out there. He activates the cell. Now I get it. He's kind of isolated. He's in this other neighborhood. And so he has to send a carrier pigeon to initiate the message. I'm like, okay, I get it. He's a little isolated. They did just drive his brother right up to his building, so he's not that isolated. Anyway, starts with him with a carrier pigeon. Another guy receives the pigeon. He takes out the secret info. He decodes it. A kid in the room who sees him decoding it slips out of the room to make a phone call to the newspaper. He places an ad in the local newspaper. The newspaper is published. A stack of them are dropped off on a street corner. Another kid pops open the stack. He sees that the ad is in there. He then takes that as a signal to go into the underground radio station, give the DJ a request for a specific song. The DJ puts that song on.
Dane Cook.
The DJ, fake Dane Cook, puts on the song. A suburban white guy listening to the radio in his nice house hears the song, gets a sick look on his face, takes his dog out for a walk while his wife is not looking. Then a car mechanic lady in some kind of big auto shop hears that same dog tied up in a field barking and takes that as her cue to prepare a special BMW with fake license plates. And it's so intensely comically complex the way they hand off the message to another. And then 5 minutes later, all 6 of those people meet in the same room. It's like, why didn't you just walk around and tell them and gather them up on the way to the surgery where they're having their trackers removed?
I just picture Wyatt and Beanie like in a room like, oh, and then they get the fucking pigeon. And then the pigeon does this. And it's like, man, you forgot to write like characters that we care about, but you wrote the shit out of this one little weird espionage sequence.
I mean, just make it simple. Have a little kid that runs around the neighborhood cluing everybody in. But the fact that it's a neighborhood conspiracy and they published an ad in a printed newspaper and had a guy whose job, I guess, was to stand on the street corner and check the newspaper every afternoon to see if this Phoenix symbol was in it and then request a song from a DJ.
Not to mention, it doesn't even work because, I mean, at the time we assume Goodman is a bad guy. He sees the paper and is immediately like, look, these are the insurgents. Like he goes to Kevin Dunn, who's the commissioner at the time, whatever his character's name is. I don't give a shit. It's Kevin Dunn.
Yeah, Commissioner Igo.
And he's like, look at this ad I found in the paper today. They're back at it.
It's not even secret. Yeah. They could have had a kid on a bicycle ride around the neighborhood and ring his little bell and all 6 of those people would have heard it. No problem.
The dog is responsible for one of the coolest shots in the movie, though, when the missiles fly into Pilsen later on. And he's just barking at them.
It's not without style. That's the thing. The movie has the style that it achieves at least prestige sci-fi TV level of stylish mood and look and vibe and everything.
One thing I wanted to give the movie kudos for is the tone at Soldier Field when they're getting ready for the legislators to appear, which are the aliens, what they call them. It does a really good job of the crowd seems excited, but like someone's got a gun to their head, like be excited. And that's like kind of a hard thing to get across on screen, but like the movie does it really well.
Yes, that's good and creepy. Just the quality of the announcer who rallies the crowd, and then the lady who sings, what song is that? Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Seen the comic.
Yeah, but with slightly modified lyrics to make them more alien appropriate.
Yeah, there's no Lord mentioned in there. It's the light. They are the light.
Yes, that all was thoughtfully created and staged. And I love the touch that there's all these overhead shots of Soldier Field and the grass has just gone to shit and burned out. And you're like, oh yeah, there's no NFL in this world. Like,
yeah, the Bears don't play.
It was a nice touch. That whole scene does have a lot of fun flavor to it.
And then even when they're leading this local Chicago politician to meet the aliens, like he's getting coached by someone who's clearly interacted with them before. Mm-hmm. And even she looks nervous, but she's like a little less nervous than he is. She's kind of giving him the rules. Let them talk first. Don't do this. Don't do that. Yeah. And you could tell he's fucking terrified. And then of course he blows up. So he didn't have to meet him after all.
Yeah, no. What was he worried about?
The movie's really good at letting you feel the fear of the people that have to interact with them.
Yes, that whole thing between people meeting aliens, they did some really thoughtful stuff there. I think I was distracted from it though because I was mad. Like I didn't even know who all these conspirators were and what they were trying for until like I figured out, oh, they're doing a bombing. This is what they're doing. But you figure it out 60 seconds before they successfully carry it off. And you go, oh, I didn't even have time to thrill over what is it going to work because it just kind of happens.
I honestly didn't mind that part. I was like, I know they're doing something and I'm just going to watch and see what it is. It didn't bother me that I didn't know like the specifics of the plan until afterwards. Because then, I don't know, we're always criticizing movies for telling and not showing.
That's true.
And then this movie went the other way. So I want to give him credit.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
This is one of the only spots in the movie where they show and not tell. Like the intro is literally 10 minutes of just text on screen.
Yeah, a lot of telling.
And then the aftermath of the attack, though, compared to the actual attack itself, bit of a letdown. We finally meet these hunter aliens, and they look like Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin.
Yes.
They're fucking goofy.
They're somehow simplified. They're even more humanoid than the regular aliens.
Because they're wearing like armor. They look like Spartans from Halo.
They kind of build them up. They go, oh no, the aliens are not going to send hunters, are they? Well, can't comment on that. Oh no, the hunters are coming, the hunters. And then they're like the low-tech version of the aliens, because we've already seen the regular aliens. They have this exoskeleton thing that morphs from like fuzzy to dangerously spiky. And then these guys show up in these like rusty medieval suits of armor and clunk around. And like, oh, these are the super bad guys?
And the movie keeps calling them roaches or ants. And part of me wonders if like they ran out of money and they were going to make them more insect-like, because they don't fucking look like insects, either the hunters or like the regular aliens. None of them look like insects.
Not at all, but I guess they live underground in the center of big cities. There's some reason to compare them to roaches, but yeah, that is weird.
They call them ants at some point too. Like somebody else calls them ants. It feels like a nickname. Like maybe the CGI wasn't finalized when they were filming it and they calling them that. And then they were like, fuck, we can only make them like fuzzy humans. This is lame. The hunters are a letdown. Again, aliens in this movie, they should have followed the Jaws playbook. Don't show them unless you absolutely have to.
So in the aftermath of the attack, there's this crazy escape from the stadium. Is that the part where you didn't like, where the alien corners Gabriel and not Gabriel, he corners Rafe in a minivan? And
yeah, they get into like a fist fight.
Yeah.
And these aliens that we've seen vaporize people without even blinking an eye are suddenly just like punching and kicking Rafe, like trying to like fist fight him.
Yeah.
And also like they're like dogs, like they're like sniffing for him. They can't,
yeah.
It's like, be consistent. Are they super intelligent, super competent masterminds, or are they like mindless drones? The movie can't quite make up its mind.
Yeah, it's kind of just pawing at him through the broken window of this van, and he's kicking at it, and then it gets defeated with a fire extinguisher. The other guy like freezes it with some CO2 and then hits it on the head and pulls his mask off.
They don't like the cold, so it's a good thing they decided to settle down in fucking Chicago.
Well,
idiots.
It's no wonder they dug a big hole underground so they could...
Yeah. They're trying to go to China.
Yeah, so it gets a little mindless. And then the hunters come in, and then there's just some sort of wrestling. Rafe ends up just tackling one to try to break out of this bus and run away. I have to give kudos for another moment. So they survive that night. They get away from that one alien. And then they're all like, I guess there's no plane. So like the only way to get out of town is to catch a bus. And they all have these fake trackers in their necks. So they have a few more minutes to try to get on the first bus to New York City. For some reason, they all get on like almost the same buses at the same time, which seems like a poor way to distribute your risk. But anyway, there's a fun moment of, oh my God, are they going to do it? One of the buses is actually starting to pull away out of the bus terminal. And right then the lights go off, the red lights turn on, and the hunters are there. And I felt like that was a satisfying moment of, oh no, dread.
But they never really say how the hunters identified them.
No, they kind of didn't. That's the thing. This is just normal police work. You can't think about it too much because the cops should have been on that bus walking the aisle. And
John Goodman would have been like, oh, there's Rafe, the leader.
The guy I'm after.
That would have made more sense.
Yeah.
And also we wouldn't have had to see the goofy Green Goblin aliens.
Yeah.
Just better overall, I think. The less we see of the aliens, the more effective they are.
Because then, yeah, you're right. It went from vaporizing people to punching and kicking to Rafe just kind of body slams one and almost gets away or almost is able to kill himself. So this was, I don't know if you caught this because this scene is quite dim. They're in this.
This is insane. I saw your note about it. I'm so glad you brought this up. Please walk us through what happens here because holy shit.
So Rafe body checks the Green Goblin because that's all it takes to get past their most deadly hunters. And then he's scrambling on the concrete of this bus terminal. And they've all been given these cyanide pills. So like, don't be taken alive because you'll give up the conspiracy. And so all he's trying to do is kill himself at this point. He just broke free. I don't know why he didn't kill himself in his seat on the bus. But anyway, he had to get out of the bus to kill himself.
That's a good point.
He's scrambling on the ground. He's fumbling for his pill. He's about to put it in his mouth. And John Goodman is, 30 yards away, running in to like catch up with what's going on in the bus station. He goes, Rafe, stop. He whips his gun out from the hip, fires a single shot, shoots the pill out of Rafe's hand, who goes, oh, and like opens his hand and the pill goes skittering across the concrete, and then they arrest him.
That could be our justified crossover of the week because I think that was Raylan Givens himself.
Is he known to do those kind of trick shots?
He's quite a shot, but I don't buy that John Goodman's 55-year-old Chicago detective is a world champion marksman.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here. It was insane.
And it was like kind of unnecessary. Why couldn't you just shoot him in the thigh and make him collapse and then have a cop step on his hand or something like?
There's a few ways to do it that were less silly.
Make him go, oh, and you see his hand open and the pill fly away. It was like,
although maybe that's a sign that Rafe is in on it with Goodman because like maybe he didn't actually shoot his hand. Like he just shot the floor 10 feet away and Rafe just like threw the pill. Like, my hand.
That's brilliant. I think you're right. That's going to be.
That's headcanon, but it's better than what we got.
No, it makes total sense. Rafe is in on it. He needed to stay alive to convince his brother to do the thing. I don't know. It doesn't work out if you think about it too much, but it almost
Don't
does.
think about it too much. Yeah, we're right there. We're so close. All All right. So then the aftermath of the Soldier Field thing, we get a scene I quite like, which is Kevin Dunn as Commissioner Ego.
I'm saying Igo. I don't remember if I ever heard it. I just saw it written in the wiki, so I copied it down.
Igo walks through the tunnels to go meet with the aliens and explain to them what happened. This is another scene where we hear the word Pilsen about 45 times. And Kevin Dunn, I don't have much to say about this scene except that, like, man, Kevin Dunn, the guy rules.
Yes. He's maybe the only actor to actually pull off what they gave him in this movie. And maybe it's because they give him some pretty stock, like the boss comes in and says, look, this is the way things going to go. And who's protecting you? It's all this kind of like talking down to the...
You got resources now, Mulligan. But he's not like a dick to him either.
No, he's good. He plays it very...
You get the sense that they work together for a long time, and he doesn't love working for the aliens, but like he says, if it gets me off this rock, because that's another thing we haven't mentioned is that the aliens are mining resources. And even though they're telling people that like, we're just going to take what we need and then we'll leave and you guys will be fine, like they're stripping the planet dry and then they're going to let everyone die. So I guess some of the humans have negotiated passage to the aliens' home planet, which sounds like a fucking nightmare. No, thank you.
Because going to their home planet is both the reward and the punishment in this movie. And I guess that's supposed to be the irony of this police commissioner saying, I'm going to get a ride off the planet and it's going to be good. And in the end, he gets a ride off the planet, but it's to be imprisoned by the aliens.
Yeah, you get the sense they have some kind of like work camp situation going on back home. But yeah, he plays it like an exhausted bureaucrat who's just trying to not get fired and or murdered, which is like kind of how I think most people would react to the situation. We're not all heroes.
And like you said, he gets to play another one of the setups of human politicians going into alien world because he has this big conversation with Mulligan as he's strapping in, getting disinfected, putting on the masks to actually go down into the depths of the whatever they call the alien zone to report to them face to face. And his sort of very ordinary Chicago bureaucrat guy about to have an alien confrontation. It's a cool juxtaposition.
Yeah. What does he say? They hate how we smell.
Yeah, he jokes about that as he's being sprayed down with mist.
And I know we haven't mentioned him at all, but also one of the insurgents played by Alan Ruck. The movie's got a cast, man.
Yeah.
He doesn't get a lot to do.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, I know all the faces in this movie, but I'm like, which one is Alan Ruck is the dude that I knew from Succession.
Also, that is our justified crossover of the week, Mr. Alan Ruck.
Justified crossover of the week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he played a dentist who used to be an accountant for the Mexican cartel and is now in hiding.
Oh, neat.
It's great. It's one episode. It rules. Yeah. Alan Ruck. Godspeed. He dies in this movie, though, I'm pretty sure.
He does. He goes out the window. There's a
right. That montage is dark.
Trigger warning galore because there's a montage where a great number of the conspirators do away with themselves at the end.
Because they're being outed on the news and whatnot. So they just decide to go out on their own terms. It's another effective sequence.
Yeah. But the question is, was that their plan all along? Or did only the Vera Farmiga and John Goodman characters know that they were like setting all these people up to...
That this was a suicide mission ultimately? I think they knew.
I think so too.
Because Goodman says to Gabriel at one point, what if the plan was to fail?
Yeah, the plan was definitely to fail. And yeah, that's why everyone is so damn mopey. Alan Ruck is as mopey as anybody in this, in his little role as the newspaper ad coordinator.
Okay, you want to walk us through the end of the movie?
Sure, here we go. Detective Mulligan shows Gabriel that he's holding his brother Rafe captive and subjecting Rafe to a brutal interrogation. By promising to let his brother live, Mulligan coerces Gabriel into working as an informant. So Gabriel submits and leads the authorities to Phoenix's top leader, a sex worker named Jane Doe, played by Vera Farmiga. Doe is killed in the subsequent police raid, but it's then learned that she had collected information from her clients, which included Police Commissioner Eugene Igo. Information which allowed Phoenix to successfully target the Soldier Field rally. With Igo disgraced, Mulligan is then promoted to take his place as acting commissioner in order to report to the aliens in their underground headquarters. Before he goes, Mulligan meets one last time with Gabriel to give him an electronic memory card. And then, as Mulligan descends into the alien's lair, Gabriel watches the video contained on that card. Gabriel learns for the first time that Mulligan, Doe, and all of the insurgents we met in Phoenix were part of a tight-knit community of Gabriel's parents, family, and friends in Pilsen. The entire failed resistance plot was engineered to allow Mulligan to gain the aliens' trust and enter their seat of power strapped with an enormous bomb. Mulligan successfully destroys the aliens' Chicago stronghold and sets off a chain of insurgencies around the world which begin to liberate humankind.
Fucking Pilsen. Yeah, so there's really not a ton to this section here, even though it's the big reveals. There's not a lot of meat on these bones, which is why I thought the movie was over at the end of the second act.
This first emotional part, they've got Rafe. They're torturing Rafe, apparently, unless you believe that it's all fake, to coerce Gabriel. Why would they have to coerce Gabriel? It doesn't make sense.
More unnecessary espionage.
Yeah. So
Time from the other side.
They got Rafe strung up in a room and he's clearly been beaten. They show him to Gabriel and is like, you can save your brother if you agree to help us get to the number one. They make a lot out of it, but like we said before, I guess we kind of talked about it. Like, you don't really feel the nature of the relationship or the bond between those brothers. We saw them arguing about, should you run, should you fight? But he kind of just saves him because he's like, oh, my brother's fucked up. I guess I got to do this.
There's not a ton of work done to really sell these brothers being super close. It's also confusing. Did Rafe really not want Gabriel involved at all? Did he really want him to go to the lake house? Or did he count on him like showing? I don't know. There's unanswered questions I have about all this, but for whatever reason, yeah.
So you're supposed to feel really conflicted. Like this is for Gabriel.
Yeah. Couldn't Goodman have just been like, give me 5 minutes alone with him and then not said a word and then been like, I know who the number one is.
That's where it breaks down. He knew all along. He didn't really need to break Gabriel's spirit to do this. He could have faked it because he knew.
Yeah.
But I guess he had to convince everybody else. Nobody else on the cops knew, so he couldn't stage a raid without sending Gabriel in there, I guess, maybe.
It's a weird, sweaty kind of plot point.
And I wanted to point out what I thought was a serious moment, but was a funny moment on reflection, because at the point that Gabriel's worn down, he's in his interrogation room and he's staring at the camera on the wall. You can see the little camera graphics around the side, and he's giving this dark Kubrickian stare into the camera. And it's like, this is the moment where the hero's spirit breaks and he decides that in order to save his brother, he's got to give up the human race, right? Basically, it's kind of a big deal. While he's doing that, the camera zooms in closer and closer on his face and this intense expression. Only I realized that the camera graphics aren't moving, like the timestamp on the police camera is staying there in the corners of the film. So it's not that like it was a cinematic choice to zoom in on his face on this interrogation camera. It was a choice by the cop who was controlling that camera to do this long 30-second slow dramatic zoom on this kid's face. What was that cop thinking?
He's like, I just learned how this thing works. I'm gonna have some fun. Enhance.
Who is the cop who is having a stare down with Gabriel by zooming the camera in on him ultra slow?
It's like zoom in, zoom out. Yeah, like.
But they could, I swear, I've seen other movies. It's actually more effective cinematically if you zoom in on a grainy camera because the grain gets bigger. It has a sort of aesthetic effect to it. But they decided to.
It also has some subtext, some symbolism to it of like them losing who they are.
Yeah, loses focus. There's all kind of reasons to do it the other way, but I don't know why they chose to do it this way because it's clearly a decision. It's engineered in post. You have the shot of him on a regular camera and you're adding all that stuff. Like, why didn't they make it so that it was like our face was getting closer to the screen rather than the cop tweaking the joystick on the camera?
And then we get the closest thing this movie has to like a fist pump moment, which is when Mulligan plays his card to take control of the police department and basically outs Igo and several other top brass in the Chicago PD and high-level politicians. So Vera Farmiga was busy. She was fucking everybody to get them to spill. And also tell their secrets. Hey-o. Sorry, that was childish. That was juvenile of me. But yeah, I thought that was really cool how it was played. And Igo just getting up in the middle of all this and leaving. It's like, oh yeah, they're not going to go looking for you at all. You'll be fine. You could just go home and sleep it off.
Yeah.
But I was like, what else could he do? That's kind of a human response. Like, I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, he gave up the piece of information that the resistance needed to do the attack. And he was done.
He was done. Oh, because he's Kevin Dunn.
Kevin was done. And the aliens pretty much right away go clickety-clack. And the translator goes, Mulligan, you're acting commissioner now. They want to meet with you.
And then but there's also an extended, not really an interrogation between the aliens and Goodman, but like a briefing, I guess. Through a translator, they ask him a series of questions about Pilsen. What's the average rent there? Where's the best place to get a bacon, egg, and cheese? They got questions. No, they ask him questions about the attack, how he rooted out the conspirators, all this stuff. He plays it convincingly.
Yeah. And the other thing I thought that really made that scene work was the translator. Actually, maybe my favorite actor in this movie. She plays it super I mean, she doesn't have much to do but relay those alien questions, but she feels really real. Did you take note of her?
I did, actually. Like, she kind of is included in my all-encompassing. The people who have to interact with the aliens on a regular basis clearly have PTSD. There's something haunted about her. I thought was really effective.
Yeah, and she doesn't even have any lines of her own. She's just relaying alien lines.
But she has like a look in her eyes that's it draws you in.
Yes.
Good actor. I don't even know if I've seen her in anything else, but she nailed it.
Killer performance. Yeah, it helps make that scene really powerful and fun.
But then you got fucking Goodman mailing it in across across the way. Like, I was able to ascertain the whereabouts. And then, like, no, man, you're killing it.
You know, at this point, I had more sympathy for Goodman's portrayal because there's a moment that I liked that I wanted to give him credit for. They send Gabriel into Jane Doe's place so that the cops can come in and kill her. And he watches it happen on camera. He's in charge of the operation and he watches her die. And she's doing suicide by cop because she has this unloaded gun on her dresser, which is their reason for killing her. That's the move that he has to make for his power move. But he does this really nice, subtle, like he watches her get killed on the remote video and he says, stand down and wait for my arrival. And there was like a little bit of choked up thing in his voice, like he just watched a good friend and maybe a lover die as part of his plan. And he's deeply sad, but he's committed to it.
I think I'm just grading him on a curve because I know what he's capable of as an actor.
Yeah, maybe I got too easy on him.
Maybe I got too hard on him.
Okay.
Compromise.
Meet in the middle.
And then Mulligan gives Gabriel a SIM card, which doesn't store videos, but whatever. We can just chalk that up to a
Pretend it does.
logistical error. And then we get the dual twist where we find it's a sweaty twist that they're all fucking like old homies, but it works.
This is the real twist reveal.
I just want to say that real people don't do things like this.
Don't like make congratulatory videos for their friends' unborn children.
Yeah,
Is that what you're referring to, or just generally act like that at parties?
both, but mostly the first thing. Vera Farmiga's character literally says, whatever you are, be a good one at one point. I was like, that's the dumbest advice I've ever heard. Like, what? It means nothing. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, it's this garden party in the back of what looks to me like a very swanky Pilsen neighborhood.
It's gotta be.
Brownstone. And it's all of Gabriel's parents' friends hanging out and making a little video for baby Gabriel, who's, you know, a month away from being
I'm sorry.
born.
Could we call him by his Babriel?
Babriel. They're making the old
thank
Babriel
you.
video. They're like, hey, Babriel, we hope you have a good life and you're not in the midst of an alien invasion while you're watching this video. And
That'd be a bummer.
we find out everybody, like Ruck, the newspaper guy, is teacher alongside Vera Farmiga's Priscilla. We finally find out her name. We see Goodman at this party too. Almost to me like a missed opportunity that Goodman is meeting Priscilla at this party because there's supposed to be all this poignancy in their two of them relationship where they're so choked up they can't even talk to each other at the beginning, and in the end he has to witness her die. I'm like, oh, that should have been his wife. She should have gone underground early on in the invasion. And what drama if he has to sacrifice his wife? He can't even touch her, he can't kiss her, and he has to watch her die in order to save the world. But it's kind of just like that's his friend, which is okay. But
They were in a book club together once. Like,
yeah,
it's a cornball video, but it does what it's trying to do, which is let you know that all these people have long-standing roots.
it raises the question, could we have known that from the beginning? We kind of knew, all we knew was that Goodman's character was their dad's partner, but the irony wasn't there the whole time. And the rest of the characters, we had no idea they were all friends and all at the same party together.
I think it could work with knowing that in the beginning, but you'd have to rebuild the movie. It wouldn't be the same movie anymore, just with a slight change. You'd have to really start from scratch and build it from the ground up.
Yeah, it doesn't just snap together like how that would work. But it's, like I said, I love that dramatic irony because it's very powerful. But you're like, man, I had to wait an hour 45 to learn that the movie was powerful. I thought it sucked. And then you end up with that feeling like, oh, okay, it's kind of cool, but
Do you want to know a secret?
yeah.
If you think a movie sucked for an hour and 44 minutes, guess what? It sucked.
It sucked.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then you raised an interesting question in your notes about, we know that the Soldier Field attack was meant to fail to get everyone in their positions where they needed to be, to get Goodman into the role of commissioner so he could go down into the tunnels and blow up all the aliens in Chicago. But then, like, how far back does that go?
Yeah.
You know, there was a lot of attempts to blow up the aliens before that. Like we hear about Wicker Park constantly. Was that supposed to fail, or were they just kind of adapting and rolling with the punches?
Yeah, it's a good question. I tried to work through the scenario in my head. Like, they designed Wicker Park to fail so that the cops and the aliens could get cocky and tell each other, insurgency's dead, don't worry about it. So that John Goodman could be the only cop who stayed on top of the insurgency so that when Soldier Field succeeded, he could take all the credit, right? Because if nothing had preceded Soldier Field, he wouldn't be in that position to be like, I'm the only guy who told you this was going to happen, and I'm the guy who found the perpetrators and cracked the case. You know, so it's almost like they had to set up some people to die at Wicker Park. They let Rafe live because they needed him to execute Soldier Field. I know it's very complicated, but that's a lot of, now that's like a crazy amount of human sacrifice to get to this level of success.
Not to mention that Rafe does survive and and probably gets the most horrific outcome you can imagine, being shipped off to the aliens' home planet.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Captive State. A movie I would say we agree is mostly don't hate it, don't love it, probably never watch it again. Well, let's find out what these people are up to, though, huh?
Did they ever work again?
No.
Oh.
Yes, actually, they have. So Rupert Wyatt did executive produce and direct. He directed the whole season, but directed the first 2 episodes of Apple TV's Mosquito Coast, which was kind of like a loose reimagining of that Harrison Ford movie from, was it the 80s?
I'm actually curious. I was curious to watch that. I never got around to it.
It's Justin Theroux is in the lead. I heard mixed things about it, but if I'm ever in a show hole, it's on my list because like a lot of the people involved. And I think the cartel's involved. You know me, I'm a sucker for cartel stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Cartels and Justin Theroux. That's
up my alley for sure. And yours.
Sure.
But his next movie is creatively titled Desert Warrior, starring Anthony Mackie, Ben Kingsley, and Charlton Copley, and coming to a blast zone near you shortly after it's released because it looks fucking dog shit.
Oh, really?
To be honest. I don't think he's bad as a director necessarily. He made a UK prison break drama called The Escapist back in 2008 with Brian Cox, which is really good.
Okay.
And then he was the one that restarted the Planet of the Apes franchise. He directed that first, the James Franco one, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is my least favorite of the new trilogy, but it's still a good movie. So I don't think he's without talent. He's just found himself in a bit of a rut here.
Yeah, those movies are widely credited with doing something fresh and original with an old sci-fi concept.
And Andy Serkis deservedly gets a lot of credit for that, but Wyatt had to put him in place and put the pieces together. And then Wyatt's wife, Erica Beanie, who is a screenwriter, she actually wrote the original Project Greenlight winner. Remember Project Greenlight with Damon and Affleck?
I never followed that, but I remember that being a thing.
It was like a reality show / competition kind of thing where the winner would get to make a movie. And her movie won. It was called The Battle of Shaker Heights. Okay. It's a real movie you can watch. I never have. It's got decent reviews. It's kind of like a coming of age tale, I believe. But she's been working with Wyatt recently, so she wrote Desert Warrior with him.
Okay.
And she's also writing the upcoming series Urban Jungle. I'm begging whoever names these things to pull their head out of their ass and stop letting AI name your projects because these are the most boring names I've ever heard of.
Get creative. At least Urban Jungle it's super cliche, but it has a piece of irony in it, right? The contrast between cities and jungles. But Desert Warrior is literally pure on the nose, doesn't suggest anything interesting.
Be like a boxing movie called like Punchy Man. Oh yeah, he is a punchy guy. But like Urban Jungle or Concrete Jungle has been like a term since like the 40s, I think.
It's so tired. It can't possibly mean anything to anybody right now.
It's just words, man. They're like, we got to name it something. All right, let's talk about the actor. So Ashton Sanders, aka Gabriel, best known for Moonlight, I think, when this movie came out. I think he has the longest stretch in that movie.
Okay.
Plays the teenage version of the main character who's played by a few different actors throughout. But he also has had roles in The Equalizer 2, which wasn't there just a new Equalizer that just came out?
Yeah, Equalizer 3 is out now, I think.
And Native Son, which I haven't seen. He played Jimmy Palmer in Judas and the Black Messiah, a movie I very much enjoyed.
I did too.
And he played Bobby Brown in the Whitney Houston biopic, I Want to Dance with Somebody. I didn't even know that was a thing.
I didn't either, but I can see him.
He's got the look.
He's got the look for Bobby Brown, yeah. More than probably for RZA.
For RZA, yeah. Definitely more than for RZA. But he got good reviews for that, so I might want to check that out, because Bobby Brown is another guy like the RZA, where I'd be like, I can't see him playing him, because Bobby Brown was coked out of his fucking mind and had a ton of energy and was a crazy asshole.
I wonder if he pulled some of that off.
So I might have to check that out and see, because like I mentioned, he was playing the RZA on Wu-Tang and American Saga, which just wrapped up its 3rd season this year and is done now. That was the 3rd and final season.
Okay.
I'm almost done with season 2, but I'm not sure I'm going to continue, because his performance is somehow getting worse.
Oh, no.
Because now he's trying to talk with the RZA's cadence, and he's really missing.
Oh, weird. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. And I'm a big Wu-Tang guy, so I was excited to check it out. But when the central role is that miscast, it's kind of hard to get with it.
That's too bad.
And then John Goodman, he hasn't done any movie work since Captive State, but that's because he's doing a ton of TV stuff.
Okay.
He was in BBC drama Black Earth Rising. Of course, he's still playing his role on The Connors, which was the Roseanne reboot originally.
Yeah.
And he's the patriarch in The Righteous Gemstones.
Oh, okay.
Eli Gemstone, great show. And he's been doing voice work in The Freak Brothers and Monsters at Work, so he's busy.
Nice.
Good for him. He deserves to be working. But like, I watched The Righteous Gemstones. I see he's got so much energy and so full of life, even at he's getting up there. And it makes his performance in this movie feel even worse in comparison.
I think I probably came in expecting less, not watching Gemstones. And I couldn't remember what I'd last seen him in. So I was like not holding up a ton of expectation at that moment.
I also watched 10 Cloverfield Lane a couple months ago. I rewatch that often because I really like it. But I feel like people don't give that movie the credit it deserves, because I think John Goodman puts in like just one of the best performances I can name.
Okay. I'm going to have to watch it.
Overall, like it's on par with Oscar-winning performances because it was in a movie called 10 Cloverfield Lane. Like it did not get those accolades.
Oh, wow. Okay. I got to do that one.
And then Jonathan Majors, sadly, he never acted again and has disappeared from the public eye completely.
Yeah. It's mysterious.
No, obviously, Jonathan Majors is still an actor, but we don't really know where he stands because he's got some ongoing legal problems, which if he is guilty of what he's being accused of, then he's probably not going to work again. And that's okay.
Yeah.
He's being accused of some pretty heinous shit.
You hate to see it. Like, because you and I think both, like when we first saw him come on screen, we're like, oh, this guy's really talented. He's done some really engaging roles. This wasn't one of them. But despite the fact that I have very dubious about him as a person at this point, like I still have found myself unable to not feel that magnetic pull of him on screen. This movie had none of that worry for me.
Just keep watching this movie and you'll lose that. Now, I just watched Creed 3 a couple months ago. I talked about it on the pod, and he's very effective in that. Still doing a thing. He's got to have a thing, but he's good. I first discovered him in Lovecraft Country, and that was a show I was anticipating quite a bit because I read the book, and I think you had as well. Right?
Yeah, we were both into that.
He was great in it, but yeah, we just got to see what happens.
Yeah.
MGK sadly died when the big deck at Club Aqua collapsed and his head fell off. So RIP to him.
That keeps happening, man.
I know, it's fucked up. You get into Aqua?
Actually, I'm kind of more into I forgot the other name.
Haunted House.
Haunted House.
I dip in there.
I blew the joke.
That's okay.
This is a betrayal on levels that no one's ever seen.
All right. Do you want to hear what we're covering next week?
I sure do.
I picked this one for you, buddy.
Oh, really?
You're fin deep in Moby Dick, the audiobook. So I wanted to pick a movie that would be topical for your experience. And I remembered just a few short years ago, we got a star-studded take on the true story that Moby Dick was based on called In the Heart of the Sea.
Yeah.
Directed by Ron Howard, starring Chris Hemsworth, Cillian Murphy, Tom Holland.
I didn't realize all those guys. I knew about Hemsworth. I didn't realize it was that stacked a cast. Wow.
It's a stack. Brendan Gleeson. It's
how did this bomb? It sounds awesome.
And Ron Howard.
Yeah.
He's still a name. I had $100 million budget, only made $93 million. So it lost quite a bit of money. I did watch it. I didn't hate it. I didn't watch it with such a critical eye because the podcast was not even a twinkle yet. But I'm excited to go back to it and see if it's worth the Moby Dick comparisons.
Thank you for picking this with me in mind. I actually read the book. I think before the movie came out, there was some hype about the book, and I read it at the time. The book is quite harrowing. What happens to these people in real life? Looking forward to checking this out.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. You can follow us on Twitter, not X. We don't believe in that.
No, we're not even on X, but we're totally on Twitter.
Yeah, we're at BlastZonePod. You can email us, blastzonepod@gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.